This week, I'm resharing one of the most popular episodes of 2025. And the reason that I am re-releasing this episode in particular is not just because it was one of your favorites, but also because reconnecting with your inner knowing is one of the things that I see helps my clients move forward into the life that they desire the most. It has such a profound impact. If you've ever felt lost or overconsumed by the noise of others' opinions, this episode helps you navigate back to your inner knowing and a life that feels like your own again. Welcome to Too Much, Not Enough, the podcast helping 6- and 7-figure female leaders understand how chasing success is causing low self-worth and anxiety, and how awakening your divine feminine energy will reignite flow, abundance, and ease, making you feel excited about life again. I'm your host, Hannah O'Donovan, channel and activator of the untamed divine feminine. Let's get into it. In this episode, you'll discover how we lose connection to our inner knowing and the subtle signs your body gives you when you're out of alignment. Why anxiety, depression, and overthinking might actually be messages from your nervous system, not things that you just have to learn to live with. And the small but powerful practices that rebuild self-trust and reignite your sense of grounded clarity. So here you go on the last day of 2025. I hope you enjoy. I love a probing question. Anyone who knows me knows that. And the deeper the question, the more it can shift your perspective as you dive into it, the better. So I'm going to start today with a question. What if the clarity you've been chasing isn't out there? It's not in another experience, another course, another person's opinion, another conversation, but instead, it's inside you, quietly waiting ever so patiently for your return. In today's episode, I'm inviting you into the powerful and tender process of reconnecting with your inner knowing. We'll talk about the moments we abandon ourselves, the signs that we're out of alignment, and how to rebuild trust with that voice inside you that always knows the way, that's always been there, but perhaps has been a little buried under the opinions of others. So this episode's for those who want to come back to their truth after external conditioning, busyness, or burnout has clouded their clarity. And boy, oh boy, was I that person. I mean, in some cases, some ways, some days, I still am. But for like 30 plus years of my life, I shoved my inner knowing so deep down into a locked box behind a bunch of doors with all these different passcodes. And instead, I went searching everywhere outside of myself to find the answers I needed. I had disconnected so much from my inner truth that I couldn't even hear it. It wasn't even a whisper anymore. It was silent. Although maybe that's not entirely the case, but it felt really, really quiet. And I was constantly looking for everyone else's input on what I was experiencing, on what I should do. And I consistently put other people's thoughts, opinions above my own, thinking, I must not know, or I'm not the authority in this situation, or these people seem to know better than me, and so I will hold more weight in their opinion than my own. And over years and years and years of doing this, I managed to turn the volume so far down on my inner knowing that I was building a life that I didn't even want to be a part of. And more to the point, I didn't even know that at the time because I was so disconnected. And I've thought about this a lot over the years, like, why did that happen? Because now, in the years that I have spent coming back to myself and remembering and building back trust, I have come to learn that I have an incredibly strong inner knowing. I have a really deep and loud and beautiful and smart and intelligent intuition. And so what happened that I was so mistrusting of it? And in some of that excavation and some of that exploration, I've realized I'm a highly sensitive human being. I feel things, not just from an emotional perspective, very deeply. I have always been highly sensitive from like all the inputs, everything coming into my body. And so I have a theory that as a child who was not equipped to manage how sensitive I was to the world around me, I learned how to turn the volume down on that subtle knowing, on that ability to tap into all the subtleties of life, of other people, of interactions, of energies that I believe I was sensing. And in order to survive without the tools to lean into that sensitivity, I turned the volume way down. And with that meant I disconnected from myself, from my body, and as a byproduct, from my inner knowing, my intuition, that gut feeling, that truth that resides within you, that is always guiding you in the best interest of what your soul came here to do on this planet. And then as I got older and it became more clear to me that I wanted to belong, I wanted to be accepted and loved by my family, my friends, partners, all of that. And each time I either stated my needs or shared my opinion, and that was met with either resistance or dismissal for whatever reason, each of those moments was a piece of data, piece of information that I took in. And as those pieces compiled, I sold myself this story that like other people knew better. Who I, wanted to really be at my core was not wholeheartedly embraced by others. Then that meant that I was the problem, that something was wrong with me, not that something was wrong with others. And at the base of it, nothing's wrong with anyone. It's just different people in different seasons have different abilities to accept and connect with who you are at your core. But I think we all have that conditioning that gets built up over time, over the little micro experiences that we have in life that then builds this story that like the thing that I know to be true inside is not necessarily the thing that is going to get me what I want in the moment. And so therefore I will shut down this voice and listen to that voice out there. And so the moment I first realized that I disconnected from my intuition was when my body started fighting back at essentially the decisions I was making, the misalignment, the self-abandonment that I was in. And for those of you who perhaps this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, you might not know about my history. I highly recommend going back and listening to episode 1 of the podcast, which is So I Burned My Life Down at 33. And that will give you a backstory that I won't go into detail here for those who have been along in the journey. But essentially, I was working so out of misalignment in my life, both personally and professionally, and I was ignoring every ping, every signal, every message that my intuition was sending me out of fear. And I finally, what I believe happened is my body took over and said, no more. This is like big intervention time. We got to do something to get this girl back on track. And I had a huge nervous system breakdown, which ended up in me ending my long-term relationship at the time because it was a big contributing factor to the misalignment, moving back in with my parents and picking up the pieces of my life and sort of rebuilding and learning how to come into connection with my body. And that is when I finally made a decision that was in alignment with what I wanted. When I finally did it and realized that the sky did not fall, that my entire life did not crumble, that actually I was putting myself on the path I wanted to be on that I was trying to force and make work previously, and that I felt this like relief and also power building up in me, that's when I realized, wow, not only had I been so disconnected from it, but like I didn't even really understand what it meant to listen to your intuition. I'd read so many books and listened to so many podcasts and consumed so much content that talked about following your intuition. Like one of the ones that comes to mind is Glennon Doyle's book, Untamed. She talks about the inner knowing in that book. And even then I like understood the concept theoretically, but not in an embodied way. And it has taken me years to really, truly repair that relationship with my intuition and then understand its power. And I think I'm only at the tip of the iceberg of what this, following my gut and my truth inside is going to lead me to, which is so exciting. But I just remember that confusion of like, okay, I've made a decision for myself. I now see how disconnected I've been from it. And also, I'm so confused about what intuition even is and how do I start trusting, like listening to that inner voice when I've spent so many years saying, no, you're wrong, shut up, and going outside myself for every decision, opinion, confirmation of where I should go. And so that's all to say that, like, if you are listening to this being like, I feel like I'm disconnected from my intuition and I feel like I want to reconnect with my inner knowing, but I'm confused as all hell, I feel you. I understand. And I'm sorry that I do not have a magic wand I can wave to completely remove that from the equation. That is a phase that you need to go through of the reconnection. But what I'm hoping I can offer you in this episode is a little bit of like a roadmap of sorts and also some maybe future hope. If you're at a different stage of this than I am, of how worth it is to go through the discombobulation that happens and come back to clarity within yourself. And what I find is at kind of the base of this reconnection to oneself has to start with acknowledging how much information you're taking in from outside of you. And listen, in this day and age, we all are bombarded with information, ideas, opinions, different ways of doing things all day, every day. If you're on your phone, social media, at work, having conversations, hanging out with your family, like it's an onslaught of information all the time. And it is tough to turn down the external noise in order to turn up the internal volume. So I want to acknowledge that first and foremost. What I am about to share and talk about it sounds simple, but it is not easy. However, in my experience, it is essential to turn down the external noise, at least at the beginning, in order to come back to self. Because if you are constantly taking in other people's ideas and opinions, how are you going to have the space and clarity to even figure out what your own opinion is? It's like trying to have a conversation at a loud concert. Like there's so many competing noises, your voice is going to get drowned out. So you got to take a step back, and that's what I did. Some of the main things that I personally have done to turn down that noise are I stopped consuming traditional news. Like I stopped watching news channels. I removed the news apps I had on my phone and just really disconnected from that. And I will be honest, I was worried about that at the beginning because I was like, oh my gosh, I need to be up to date with current events and I need to know what's going on in the world. And it's selfish of me to step back and not pay attention because some people don't have that luxury of disconnecting from certain things that are going on. And so who am I to do that? And I've wrestled with this question over and over again in my life. And I now come to the same conclusion, that is, as a highly porous, sensitive human being who is ruled by her emotions, I cannot be of any help to other people. I cannot be in service of others in the way that I want to if I am drowning under the weight of the consistent bad news cycle. And so as much as I do believe it is my responsibility as a citizen of this current world to stay connected and not shut my eyes at the atrocities that are happening, if I am not in a place where I have the mental capacity to handle that, it is okay for me to shut it out, because I am no help to anyone if I am lying in bed and can't get out. So that's all to say, I stopped consuming the news. I have in the past done some pretty significant social media breaks, which were so important for me. I now am on social media for work, so I'm on it more than I'd like to be, but I put things in place, like I turn notifications off on my social media apps, and actually most apps on my phone 5-6 years ago, if not more now. I don't have notifications on my mail. I don't have notifications on my Instagram, TikTok, pretty much anything, actually. My phone's on silent all the time. I don't even get notifications for text messages. And that is one of the ways that I shut out the noise, because any information coming in was having an impact on me coming back to myself. And then it was really starting to build boundaries with how I absorbed the opinions of others. And I'm going to be very honest here. That is still a work in progress. But I realized, for example, my parents, very smart people, and I have spent most of my life going to them to get their opinion on what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And I realized that I couldn't make a decision without speaking to them, almost, at least on the larger things. And then slowly, as I was kind of going through this exercise of clearing the noise and starting to trust myself more, I was like, oh, I can't go to them every single time I have something, because then I am teaching myself to not trust what I already believe to be true, because it's like, okay, well, this is what I think I want to do, but I should just go double check this with my parents and sub-parents with whoever else that is in your life, your partner, your best friend. But it's like realizing that not only do you want to maybe filter out some of the opinions, but it's also about learning how not to feel like you need to ask for their opinion before you can make a decision, or that you need to go out and survey everyone around you for their opinion and gather it up and make your decision. It's like, no, I can just make a decision from what I believe to be true or what feels the most right to me, knowing that if it doesn't end up being the best decision, I can course correct. I can fix that. But rarely, and I mean, obviously there are some decisions that are life altering and can't be brought back, but rarely is there a decision that you make, especially when in connection with that knowing, that isn't in generally the best interest of like where you are going. So that was sort of the first step, just turning down the noise and also just slowing down. Because in order to reconnect with your intuition, what I have learned is you need to be present. There is a practice of presence that is required to hear that voice inside. And in order to be present, you have to slow down, because the busyness, the distractions will keep you out of the present moment, either in the past or in the future. And it is only in presence with yourself that you can hear the voice. And that presence comes from slowing down and being still, which is freaking hard when we are in a society where we can find distraction anywhere, anytime. It takes a lot of discipline to not reach for those distractions when you feel uncomfortable, and instead return back to that stillness, that quietness, and inner connection in order for things to arise, to surface. So turning down the volume on external noise, which requires some boundarying, some discernment, and then slowing down so that you can find stillness are kind of the first steps of reconnecting with your inner knowing. Alongside that, I found that the best way for me was to drop into my body, because I've spent majority of my life existing consistently in my mind, thinking I have all this control and overanalyzing and overthinking everything, which got me all twisted up in circles and made it even harder to know the quote unquote right answer. And it became very clear to me once I started connecting with my body out of necessity, the existing in my mind and trying to figure it all out in my mind was not working. Once I started coming back into connection with my body and dropping in and creating kind of an open dialogue between my mind and my body, that was a huge part of being able to go inward for the answers instead of my typical habitual reaction of going outside of myself. And then from there, it required me to start noticing, just simply noticing, not trying to fix things, not trying to spring into action, not trying to force things. I started by simply noticing what were the signals that my body was sending me that I had been ignoring. And for me, those signals were quite clear. It was my anxiety and my depression. I had always thought that I was someone who was just, I'm an anxious person. I am a person who experiences depression a lot of mood swings. That's just like how my brain is built. And it's how I'm going to be the rest of my life. And I've just got to figure out how to live with it and not, collapse under the weight of it. And I've since come to learn that that is absolutely not true, that my anxiety and my depression and my, dysregulation were all signals from my nervous system, from my body, that I was out of alignment. And so as I started noticing and really paying attention to, okay, when I'm anxious, like what could that mean? I'm talking about a body-based questioning of why I might be anxious right now, like coming back to the absolute basics. How did I sleep last night? What did I eat today? Have I moved my body? Have I been outside in the last couple of days? Because the minute you get outside, move your body, all of a sudden that feeling starts to dissipate because you're reconnecting to yourself. So once I started noticing the signals my body was sending me and getting more in tune with why it might be sending up that signal and what I had perhaps been deprioritizing that I instead needed to prioritize, I came to learn that my body's really freaking wise, and it is doing the very best it can to survive and keep me alive with, how I am treating it. And each time something came up, I was able to get a little bit more in tune with why that might be happening, a little bit more in tune with what my body was asking for, and reduce the resistance of responding. Because that was also part of the problem that I will kind of explain here. Because when I look back, while it felt like I was completely disconnected from my intuition, my body was giving me the signals. But I had a lot of resistance to responding to those signals for, I think, two main reasons. Either because I had got in my head that everything else was a priority, and then also because I had decided over the years that I didn't know better. So even though that gnawing was always there, I figured out how to say, you're wrong. This is actually what I need to do. That's to say, you probably are hearing your intuition. You might, just like me, need to learn how to stop resisting it or ignoring it. And so looking back, I had been actually ignoring what my body had very smartly been telling me all along it needed. And one very clear example of this is when I was in my previous relationship, I knew within the first few months that it wasn't right for me. But I kind of pushed that down and ignored that red flag, as you might call it. And then throughout the relationship, anytime an article came up that said 5 reasons you found your soulmate, or 4 reasons you're in an unhealthy relationship, or how to know he's the one, I would click on every single one of those things, searching for an answer that was already inside the whole time. I knew, but I didn't trust myself to make that decision. And so finding ways to release that resistance to following your inner knowing and build that trust was also an essential part in my journey, because that resistance had gotten super loud. And so as I started noticing, building that awareness of what signals my body was sending me and what they could mean, I kept testing these things, and it became clearer and clearer that my body did in fact know exactly what was right for me and was acting generally in my best interest. I then built that muscle of trust with myself. And as I did that, as I built that muscle of trust, and each time I had to make a decision, I'd still have that voice that was like, no, you don't know. You think you know, but you're going to embarrass yourself, or someone's going to tell you you're wrong. And each time I defied that voice, first with smaller things and then with bigger things, that voice that was telling me I was wrong got quieter, and the inner knowing got louder and louder. And so that's to say, this was a process of practice and repetition and doing it over and over again, and seeing that in fact, what my gut was telling me was right, or in the very few and far between moments where it wasn't, that the sky did not crumble. And what's so great about building that noticing and awareness with your body is now the signs in my body, my energy, my behavior that I've abandoned my truth, I can identify those very quickly, because I am by no means sitting here saying I am now excellent at listening to my intuition. I am always in alignment. Every decision I'm making is on my path to my future. And I have this voice telling me each next step. Unfortunately, that is not how it works. And that is why connecting to your intuition, your inner voice, is so tricky, because it's not just this voice that comes to you and goes, okay, here are the next 4 steps that you need to take in order, in detail, with the accompanied instruction manual, and that will get you exactly where you want to go. No, that voice says, don't take that job, but it doesn't then deliver you why or what job you should take instead, or, don't take that job, but don't worry, one's coming in 3 weeks, so you won't have to wait that long. That's not how it works. And that's why it's so tricky to listen to the inner knowing, because you're like, okay, I know I'm not supposed to take that job, but what the fuck am I supposed to do? Or same thing, you're not meant to be in this relationship, but don't worry, in 2 years, you'll meet the love of your life and you will build the most beautiful, fulfilling relationship with that person. No, it just says, this is not the relationship for you anymore. And then you have to get up the courage to make that decision and launch yourself off the cliff into the abyss and fucking hope with every fiber of your being that you did not just fuck everything up and that you are going to be alone forever. So as I've built awareness in my body and built that connection and trust and checking in and realigning, I have become very clear on the signs that indicate when I'm abandoning my truth. And those can be energetic, those can be behavioral, and those can just be sensations that come up in my body. And these will differ for every person, because as much as we are the same as human beings, we are different in our experiences and where we are along our journey. But some of the main signs for me that I am misaligned or I'm abandoning my truth are, I'm starting to seek out and absorb way more external information. And then I get to a point where I have overwhelmed myself with how much information is coming into my system. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm so busy and I'm really stressed, but it's all like self-imposed. And that is one of my big signs that I'm like, whoa, what's happening here? You've gone outside yourself again to find the answer rather than inside. Essentially, I get confused about what matters. So all of a sudden, I'm so absorbed in my work and I'm thinking, it doesn't matter that I'm not seeing my friends. I'm fulfilled by my work. It's fine. Or like, I don't need to prioritize intentional connection time with my partner. Basically, the top things that I value in life, which is being present and connected with loved ones, joy and pleasure. Those are just like sinking to the bottom, and I'm getting all serious and intense about things. And that's when I'm like, oh, okay, I have disconnected from my knowing, from my inner truth, and I am tumbling down a path right now that doesn't feel good. And what does it actually feel like or look like to come back? One of my very favorite ways to reconnect is having conversations with people who are just like outside of the thing that I am absorbed or consumed by. So having conversations with friends and realizing, oh shit, I was getting all serious and underwater about life. And another huge one is I like to be in the presence of children because they are just the most present versions that we can be in front of to remind us what is important and true in life. And then I like to do things that are like, for me, sauna, cold plunge works wonders, cycling through whatever is stuck in my body and bring me back into a just like my nervous system can breathe and I am able to sort of gain perspective of, again, being silly with my partner or my sister gets me out of my head and into my body. Movement, I mean, literally just like getting up, putting on a song, even if I really fucking don't want to do it, which is the times that I need it the most, and just shaking my body out, like getting that energy moving and flowing. For me, another huge thing is my somatic channeling practice, sitting and connecting with source, with my higher consciousness, my higher self, just to reset and get out of the like 3D matter heavy world that we exist in to kind of zoom out on the bigger picture. And so some of those things help me come back to that trusting, even though I don't know what it's going to look like, or I can't tell you exactly how this is going to unfold. I know so deeply inside me that this is the next step I need to take. And that's how I left my first job and went traveling for, a year, even though I was, in my mid-20s and thought, oh my God, I'm going to get so behind. I'm going to come back and my friends are going to be getting promotions. And what if I don't get a job when I get back? I didn't have the answers to any of that. The only thing I knew was like, I have to go traveling because I will regret it for the rest of my life. If I don't feel that I will regret for the rest of my life if I can't get a job immediately when I come back. It's the reason that I left my full-time event planning job and started working for myself 7 years ago, because I had that gut feeling that if I stayed where I was, I'd be stifling my possibility because I would be relying on other people to tell me my worth and facilitate my growth. Did I know that working for myself was going to work out at the time? No, I had no idea. In fact, I was terrified, but I just listened to that inner knowing and thought, if I don't do this now, I know that I am going to regret it. Once again, that inner knowing came back, leaving my long-term relationship. And then more recently in shutting down my lucrative event production business and starting Soma, starting my somatic coaching and starting this podcast. There were so many voices in my head that were like, you can't do this. You don't have a big enough following. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to market a podcast. You don't have time. But because I have followed my gut before and it has led me into the best experiences of my life, I knew that I had to listen and do it, even though I didn't have the answers of how it was going to work out. And like I said earlier, that is the hardest part of following and connecting with your inner knowing. It is somehow easier to us to look at someone or something externally for the answers, because I guess maybe if it doesn't work out, we can be like, well, I listened to so-and-so, or this person told me that I should do it this way, so it's kind of their fault. Whereas if I'm like, well, I listened to my gut and I failed, that somehow means that I'm a failure, which is not true at all. The courage it takes to listen to your gut in itself is the success. And then from there, like, to keep betting on yourself and keep trusting that nudge, that pull that I now understand leads you to the life that is meant for you, because that life is probably beyond your wildest dreams. Like, the reason why we have to believe this inner knowing is because we can't even picture how good it can get. And if we can't picture how good it can get, then how do we plan and control our way to that unknown scenario? No, we have to tune in, figure out, okay, what's the next right step, trust in life leading us where we need to go so that we can get to the thing that right now we don't even know is possible. Like, it's wild. Anyways, I guess that is also sort of what it feels like to be deeply in tune with your intuition. Not only is it incredibly empowering because you're like, holy shit, like, I can kind of make magical things happen when I listen to my intuition. Like, you do actually feel a bit witchy because you're like, oh my God, my intuition told me to do that. I did it. And then this fucking awesome thing happened. Like, for example, I had been ideating on this podcast for a long time. You know, for a while, I was like, I don't know what to do it on, what to talk about, what's going to land. There's so many podcasts out there. Like, how am I going to stand out? Actually, the name came to me as a download, the Too Much, Not Enough. And when it came literally down through me, I was like, I know this is it. I've got to follow this thread. In fact, I was lying in bed and I could not fall asleep. I jumped out of bed, got on my laptop, and just like jammed with ChatGPT for an hour and like outlined the whole thing. And from that moment of the download of the name to publishing my first episode, I think it was like 3 weeks, which, for those of you at home, highly, highly do not recommend at all, because it almost broke me. I'm glad I did it because I just needed to get it out there, but that is not how I would launch a podcast again, ever, ever, ever. But the number of people who have come to me, come out of the woodworks, friends from high school that I haven't talked to for ages, friends of my parents, people just like all over who are coming out and being like, thank you. I love your podcast. I love your honesty. This is like exactly the conversation I needed to hear. Just all of the things that I hoped when I put my heart and soul on the line, having these conversations, which is sometimes scary and uncomfortable, even if it would land for one person to be like, oh my gosh, okay, I can take a deep breath. I'm not as broken, depraved, gross, weird, mean, whatever as I thought I was. I'm not too much. Even for that to land with one person was my hope. But the fact that it has landed with so many more and in such a deep and connected way, I never would have been able to experience that if I had gotten that download and been like, nah, that's a stupid idea. So like, to get back to this question of what it feels like to be deeply in tune with your intuition, it's making magic. Like, the way that this podcast has evolved feels like magic to me. And it came from connecting with my intuition. The synchronicities that start happening when you really trust and follow your intuition are wild. I'm going to encourage you to connect with your inner knowing, because what unfolds from that place is truly nothing short of magic. And if you're anything like me, all the things that you have craved in life, the wild, crazy, seemingly unattainable dreams that you've had for yourself that maybe you've never uttered to a single other person for fear of looking silly or admitting to yourself even that that's what you want, those things become so much more possible and so much more real when you start making decisions that are in alignment with your truth, with your path, not someone else's, not your mom's, not your sister's, not your boyfriend's, not your boss's, but yours. So I will leave you with, if this is a brand new practice to you, or if it's a practice that you need to come back to, look at it as that. It is a practice in the same way that if you used to go to the gym all the time and then you stopped for a while and then you've decided to go back, you are not going to walk into the gym and be able to do the same things that you were doing before necessarily. Or if it's your very first time, you are going to have to start smaller, lighter weights, no weight, for example. But that's the point. You start. You just start the practice. You start going to the gym. You start showing up. And as you do more and more and more, you then realize, oh, wow. Okay, I was doing 5 pounds last week and I can do 7.5 pounds now. And that seemed impossible before. That is how you build the practice of connecting with your truth, with your inner knowing. You just start somewhere and you push through the unfamiliar feelings that happen. So start small, keep practicing, keep coming back. Don't abandon when you feel uncomfortable. Maybe take a rest, take a pause, take a break, get out of your head, and then come back to it. Because I want everyone to experience the magic that comes with being connected to your truth and that feeling of like empowerment and inner fire that comes with listening to your intuition, standing up for yourself and not backing down when you know deeply what is right and best for you, whether it's for yourself, for your relationship, for your family, for your work. It doesn't mean that people are always going to agree with you and all of a sudden everything's going to feel easy and everyone's like, oh my God, you are right. You are amazing. No problem. Of course. But it will get easier to face that resistance because you will feel stronger and stronger that you are doing the best right thing for you. Are you still stuck in the cycle of overdrive and feeling anxious even after trying things like meditating, journaling, maybe even resting? These tools only work at the level of the mind and can't create the safety your body is craving when your nervous system is dysregulated. That's where the somatic return journey comes in, a free 5-day audio experience designed to help high-achieving women like you finally regulate your nervous system, awaken your divine feminine energy, and reconnect with the part of you that leads with flow and not force, no matter what's happening around you. In less than 15 minutes a day, you'll feel more grounded, empowered, and emotionally agile by this time next week. Head to the link in the show notes to get started.